They didn't know it was impossible, so they did it.
In a small way, we did the same thing. We met in Paris, staying at the Hotel Brighton on the Rue de Rivoli, across from the Louvre. From here, we took a train, departing from Saint-Lazare station bound for the city of Caen, located in the center of Normandy. Though many would come in and out of our group over the course of this adventure, the core team consisted of 5: Patty, Walter, Mary, Damien, and myself. This was our first trip traveling with Damien, and his knowledge of the language, area, and people became the glue that held together the hundreds of hours of preparation required by Patty, Mary, and himself. Damien's skills as an explorer frequently put him at the pointy end of our team's spear, and we all quickly learned to quietly and swiftly follow his lead. Aboard the train, we had our first extraordinary experience begin to unfold. Seated with us was an 89-year-old veteran named Frederick Carrier, traveling with his son and granddaughter. What initially caught our eye was his patch of a seahorse. As our conversations evolved, we learned that his seahorse patch signified that he was an amphibious engineer. Frederick then proudly showed us some photos and text that read as follows. In this picture, T5 Corporal Frederick Carrier, monument designer, stands at attention at the dedication ceremony conducted by Colonel Eugene Caffey, CO of the recently erected 531st Engineer Shore Regiment Memorial. The monument Carrier designed commemorates his regiment and those units that participated on D-Day. The concrete obelisk is built on top of the Nazi-fortified bunker captured in the first wave on D-Day, June 6, 1944, and it became his regiment's headquarters. This monument is the first American World War II monument built by Army engineers in Europe. Shortly after this picture was taken, Corporal Carrier's regiment moved to Holland to support Market Garden, a campaign to prepare for the successful Rhine River crossing and unconditional surrender of Hitler's Nazi Party on May 8, 1945, and the end of the war in Europe. Arriving in the train station in Caen, we got in our rental car and headed to the small village of Dives-sur-Mer, where Damien's mother had an efficiently small home that would be our base for the next several days. We started our first full day in Normandy with a nice breakfast and a visit from a Norwegian film crew that had tenaciously been following Walter for the past few weeks, from San Diego to Bergen and now to Norway. But this morning, Walter wanted to work on the tide predictions for the D-Day celebration first. And the lowest tide is at 7:40 a.m., and that's at 3.5 meters.
7:40
Yep, a.m.
at 3.5.
At 3.5 meters.
That makes
So that's,
5.7
right?
meters.
5.7.
That's almost 18 feet.
Uh-huh.
That's tremendous.
Isn't that? That's remarkable.
Yeah. Not warm, is it?
Not yet.
Larry, did you ever do my studies outside today?
Next on the agenda was an important event, Walter and Mary setting first steps upon the beaches of Normandy. They did this on the easternmost edge of the beaches, used by the Allies 70 years earlier.
Don't tell me you want me to walk through the water.
On the water.
Walk on the water.
You tell me my one down there where the grass is.
Then we were off to navigate the quickly filling roads to the other end of Normandy and Utah Beach, the westernmost edge of the D-Day landing sites. The trip took over an hour, and many stories were shared along the way.
The summer quarters. And we had a general named White, and he used to make a speech. He'd say, "What do you call this, man?" Everybody looked at him. "That's a uniform, General." "And why do you call it a uniform?" "Because it's got to be uniform, General." He wanted everybody to be dressed alike. That was his greatest pleasure. And we were moving down south in California, and he was way back in the desert, 60 miles back, where it was nice and warm, and we were, in front was cold, but we had to have the same uniform, we froze. But then it was 1 hour later, freezing down came the command. Down we were in the lead, and we went back inland to the desert, and it was beginning to be sunny and warm, and we were very happy. But he was now out in the cold. So the order came down, blouses and sweaters. So we were in the desert, we had to wear the warm thing. We were always out of phase with the general. And so that was the story.
As we continued, we were surrounded by an ever-increasing presence of local clubs, dressed as soldiers in period uniforms and with carefully restored and preserved equipment on parade to augment the overall spirit of the celebrations now well underway.
Just good old-fashioned military.
Get this one.
There's the one over there.
Made it massive. Look from there.
Look.
What country are they from?
Sorry, I didn't see.
Left. All that big.
Deutschland, yeah.
Oh,
I
look
guess
at the
that
camp
can't
over
be
there on
there.
the left. Yeah, it's this whole thing on the left.
Oh, look, the flags there.
They recreated the camp.
Yep. Dog green camp.
Dog one exit. One of the...
Where are you going? Omaha Beach?
Look
Omaha
at
Beach is behind you.
No, we're going to Point Duac, yeah. Our first stop was the memorial at Point Duac for the grand opening ceremony of the newly constructed museum. Walter's request for a quick trip to the toilet resulted in our being ushered into the as yet unopened museum, and this evolved into the first ever private tour, and then an interview with the military press corps.
So,
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Nice
Pleasure to make your acquaintance. Is it you, sir, I have to thank for the weather today?
Of course.
Oh no, we made it.
Yeah.
We were at the French Hydrographic Office yesterday.
Yeah.
And you arranged.
He ordered it up
And
specially.
the man in charge.
I should have known you before.
And we said, we need sunshine. He said, you get it.
Outstanding. Well, am I between you and the restroom?
You are.
That's not a good place to be. Right this way.
It's over.
I got some candies. That's it.
it will be open from inside, so it's not open yet, but in 2 seconds or 2 minutes it will be open.
So, do you mind if I ask you how young you are?
I am 96.
Oh, okay.
As an encore, we were given a lift by electric cart around the trails of the monument.
All visitors, right? These
Yeah,
people
all these people are visitors.
are very nice.
These are the boys of Pondy Hawk. These are the men who scaled the cliff. These are the champions who helped free the continent.
That's right.
This is where everything started.
Yes, we're allowed to build it on time.
Mr. Alan Sparrow of the 5th Ranger Division. Mr. Ray Tollefson of the 2nd Ranger Battalion. And not to be left last, Major General John Ron, who at the time was the captain of Headquarters Company, 5th Ranger Battalion. A soldier, a man who holds the Silver Star and Bronze Star medals for valor, the Secretary of the American Battle Monuments Commission, Secretary Max L. Cleland.
Thank all of you. It's times like these I wish I'd paid more attention in French class. Before I get into the presentation, I want to say, as someone who spent 7 years in a high school band, which might give you the idea that I was a slow learner, but when we said take your seats, we realized you only have your seats. So thank you very much for your music and your dedication to coming here. For the Army Rangers, the rest of us who never went through that experience have only admiration for you. I had the privilege of meeting Sergeant Lynn Lamel, who climbed Point du Hoc and went and found the 155 millimeter French howitzers and destroyed them, which was the objective of the Rangers at Point du Hoc.
From the ceremony at Point du Hoc, we then went to Utah Beach for the remainder of the afternoon and evening. At each of these ceremonies, there were many thousands of people in attendance. Near the centers of activity, there were hundreds. Like us, you may begin to recognize some familiar faces in this inner circle. Over the course of these many events, we began to know some of them, and thus also begin to have a much deeper appreciation for what these events were really all about.
Feeling good? Cold?
It was now 10:30 in the evening, and we still had a 1-hour drive home and the need for some dinner. We were eventually tucked into bed around 1 o'clock in the morning, with reveille in just 3.5 hours. It was 0500 on the 6th of June, just 90 minutes shy of the 70th anniversary of the start of the main landing of D-Day. We set out for Caen, where the over 100,000 participants in the day's events were to converge. All major roads from Caen to the beaches were closed, and all travel was required to be by bus with police escort. Mm-hmm.
Spécial pour les gens qui avaient un petit peu un handicap, les
Alors
vétérans.
écoutez monsieur, on m'a parlé de l'autre parking, là c'est le parking pour les bus.
Ça, c'est
L'autre
pour les
parking se trouve derrière, au prochain rond-point à gauche.
Prochain, je reprends à gauche.
Voilà.
D'accord, merci monsieur. Bonjour monsieur.
Bonjour.
Nous sommes avec un vétéran et nous avons des invitations VIP
Oui.
1. Est-ce qu'il y a un endroit particulier
Tout droit, vous serez dirigé au parking là-bas.
Parfait, merci monsieur.
Merci.
Bonne journée.
Tu dis à Nina qu'on est arrivé.
Beautiful day.
Beautiful day.
Our first destination was the American Cemetery, where the presidents of both France and the United States were to speak.
Please remain standing for the posting of the colors and the playing of the national anthems of the French Republic and the United States of America.
Nous vous demandons de rester debout pendant les honneurs au drapeau et les hymnes nationaux de la France et des États-Unis.
One could not help but notice the carefully manicured trees, all with abrupt, flat tops. These, we were told, stand as reminders of all the young, promising lives cut down in their prime.
People of France, friends, family, our veterans. If prayer were made of sound, the skies over England that night would have deafened the world. Captains paced their decks, pilots tapped their gauges, commanders pored over maps, fully aware that for all the months of meticulous planning, everything could go wrong. The winds, the tides, the element of surprise, and above all, the audacious bet that what waited on the other side of the channel would compel men not to shrink away, but to charge ahead. Fresh-faced GIs rubbed trinkets, kissed pictures of sweethearts, checked and rechecked their equipment. God, asked one, give me guts. And in the pre-dawn hours, planes rumbled down runways, gliders and paratroopers slipped through the sky. Giant screws began to turn on an armada that looked more like ships than sea. And more than 150,000 souls set off toward this tiny sliver of sand upon which hung more than the fate of a war, but rather the course of human history.
President Obama will now lay a wreath in honor of those who served and those who made the ultimate sacrifice to liberate Europe. Please now observe a moment of silence.
Messieurs, merci de vous lever pour une salve de 21 coups de canon, la sonnerie aux morts et le survol des F-15 de l'armée de l'air américaine en formation en hommage aux disparus.
Come. Come right, let's go. Go.
From the cemetery, we set our sights on Sword Beach, the location of the culminating event of the D-Day commemoration, featuring 18 heads of state and some tens of thousands of participants and spectators.
Would you like a wheelchair or no?
No, thank you.
No, that's
This was perhaps the greatest logistics feat of our trip, but with Damien's superb leadership and skills, we made it practically to show center, and apparently that was only prevented by the insistence that the various heads of state would come before us.
Et Staline décide l'ouverture d'un second front en Europe occidentale. À moins d'une heure. À Gold et Juno, la 50e division britannique et la 3e division canadienne, après de très durs combats, progressent à l'intérieur des terres. Le 8 mai, partout, les peuples fêtent la paix retrouvée. À Londres, à Paris, à New York, à Moscou.
The end of this ceremony did not mark the end of our adventure, and we had numerous other small and meaningful chances to experience more of the memories so carefully displayed for interested minds and hearts. Among these was a small town that was the site of a pre-invasion assault by a group of paratroopers. As in most of these early morning attacks, though they were virtually all successful, most of the young men lost their lives. We found ourselves standing at the gravesite of a 19-year-old soldier named Corteil. He and his paratrooper dog named Glenn were both killed as they drifted towards the French soil they intended to liberate. In contrast to the sophisticated prose we'd seen so many times, the single sentence written by his parents captured perhaps more of the totality of the great triumph and tragedy that is Normandy. Had you known our boy, you would have loved him too. Normandy is a rural and fertile land, one could not help but notice the scarlet wild poppies scattered across the countryside. We came to know, through one of Walter's stories, of a poem penned in the First World War. As a result of this poem, these poppies have become a symbol of remembrance, and we saw them ubiquitously throughout our time in Normandy. On our way back from Sword Beach, we stopped beside one of these fields to spend a moment with the flowers. Later, in a quiet moment, I found the original poem. In Flanders field the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead, short days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw sunsets glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe, to you from falling hands we throw the torch, be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.